Please welcome the CEO of the Churchill Club, Karen Tucker.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Welcome. Welcome. So glad that you're here. We have a very special treat in store for us this evening as we talk about consumer drones. And we will get to our speakers in a moment, where we will hear from them what they're excited about, maybe what they're a little bit nervous about, and certainly where they see the opportunities for innovation, economic growth, and creativity. So we're looking forward to that. For our new guests in the audience, I wanted to just tell you a little bit about Churchill Club. We were born in 1985. I know that some of the people in this room were not yet born then. The purpose of the club is to encourage innovation, economic growth, and societal benefit. And we do this through up to 40 programs that we present each year. We choose hot topics that are not over-discussed already, and we ask our speakers to say something that matters. We tell them not to pitch. We tell them not to deliver baked corporate messages, but rather to come and tell us what they think. So that is what we have in store for us with this wonderful program this evening. Our next program is next Monday night. It's all about the disruptions happening in automotive transportation. That will be at the Computer History Museum in Mountain View. In case you don't know, we post most of our programs on our YouTube channel. We've had some great ones recently. Reid Hoffman with Joey Ito, our 16th annual Tech Trends program. And you can go there and just watch them, and certainly do spread the word, because we're getting a lot of positive feedback and we just want people to be able to access them. If you're tweeting tonight, please do use the hashtag Churchill Club, and you will find other Twitter codes in your printed programs. And I certainly want to say a huge thanks to our partner, Accenture, Samantha, Julie, Robin, Elise. We really couldn't have done it without you, so please join me in thanking our fabulous partner, Accenture. And now it is time to bring up our speakers, starting with our moderator, Robin Murdoch from Accenture. Next, Chris Anderson of 3D Robotics and DIY Drones. And I'm coming over here so that they can sit down. Cheng of DJI. Jonathan Downey. I think you want to go maybe to the other side, since you're going to have to get past me. Jonathan Downey of Airware, Sanz of Skycatch and DroneGames, and take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen, and thanks to the Churchill Club for organizing another fantastic event in a really fascinating topic. So just a few words to kick off. Our focus is on small drones. We'll talk about consumer, we'll talk about the enterprise space as well. And I think we can all recognize that this is an area that is just changing by the day with just amazing potential. And I was thinking, as we were getting started, you just look at some of the things that we've seen from drone cameras in the past just this year. It's given the world remarkable footage of the demonstrations in Thailand and in the Ukraine. In a completely different realm, it's enabled us to watch SpaceX's Grasshopper reusable rocket, footage of that taking off and landing. We've seen Amazon showing their vision for how our packages might be delivered in the future. And as you've seen on these screens over dinner, just remarkable footage of the world around us, showing us unique ways to view the world. And of course, you've all just experienced, probably likely for most of you in the audience, your first droney. And dronies are obviously the latest fad, and it'll probably be very old news in a while, taken by Eric, one of the world's best drone photographers. So we're only just getting started on the drone journey. So we've got an amazing panel here with Chris, Eric, Christian, Jonathan. So let's get going. In typical Churchill fashion, we'll start with everyone introducing themselves. So Chris.
I'm Chris Anderson. I'm the CEO of 3D Robotics. I was the editor of Wired magazine for more than a decade, and how I went from the editor of a magazine to the CEO of an aerospace company is a story we'll probably end up talking about. But let's just say it's Back in the media days, I didn't have to run my own factory, and now I do. So that's the hard part. The fun part is we get to put cameras in the air and open up an entirely new frontier of imaging and big data, and that's incredibly exciting.
My name is Cheng. I'm director of aerial imaging at DJI. I sort of was on path in technology. I have a computer science degree or two, and then I sort of fell off, much to my parents' disappointment, and ended up being a photographer, doing wildlife underwater photography for about 10 years, as well as some publishing. And recently I've been sort of sucked back into technology, and here I am.
I'm Jonathan Downey, the founder and CEO of Airware. I've been in the drone space for about 10 years, beginning at MIT, then later at Boeing, working on the development of a large 6,000-pound fully autonomous helicopter system. Was briefly an airline pilot, flying the de Havilland Twin Otter between Las Vegas and the Grand Canyon, and really started Airware to address some problems that I saw as an undergrad at MIT in developing a drone for a specific kind of targeted application. So at Airware, we build a platform. The platform is hardware, software, and cloud services that really power drones and enable them to be developed by other companies. So the one thing we don't do at Airware is actually build the drones ourselves.
I'm Sanz. I'm founder and CEO of Skycatch. We build fully autonomous ground robots and UAVs for collecting data at scale. Some of our clients are Bechtel, Bouygues Construction, Clayco, and they use these robots to collect data across all of their job sites. Our goal is to help all these companies with logistics, help them optimize process with safety. And we just closed our Series A round, and very thankful to be here with you guys.
That's great. Thank you. So absolutely amazing panel. So first question to Chris. Where are we today with the underlying technologies that make these small drones possible, and where is it heading?
Sure. Well, first of all, we should probably define what a drone is, and we could probably all disagree. In any robotics panel, you will always disagree about definitions, but I would define drones as being aircraft that are capable of full autonomy, which is they fly by themselves. They have GPS guidance. It's not a piloted experience. It can be piloted if you want. We call them optionally piloted. But by and large, like any robot, they do jobs that are dull, dirty, or dangerous, and they do it without human intervention. These two are both robots, whether they look like it or not, GPS guided and incredibly intelligent, especially compared to where things were a few decades ago. The reason this is possible, the reason that these two flying robots can cost less than $1,000 is essentially thanks to the innovations in our phones. I call these the peace dividend of the smartphone wars, but basically they use the same components, the same MEMS, the sensors, the gyros, accelerometers, magnetometers, similar GPS, similar cameras, what's going on here in your phones with the processors, the supercomputers, essentially, that are running the batteries, the radios, et cetera, because of the economies of scale of the Apples and the Googles of the world. These things, these components, just put in different packages, can do things that were essentially impossible 10 years ago and $1 million 5 years ago, and now are less than $1,000 and will soon be on the shelves of Walmart.
Eric, from a photography perspective, what are the advances that you've seen and enable you to do the amazing footage that we've seen tonight?
Well, the ability for these things to be stable in space is something that photographers have been looking for a long time. Everybody who's had a GoPro in the past has put it out as far as they can on a pole, so they can get that hero shot of themselves doing something that they think will make them look cool. This is sort of the extension. You sort of let go of the pole and the camera flies away and perhaps follows you. A lot of these things are happening sort of, as we sit here today. Every week there's a new development out or a new company trying to do something like that. And so for the creative pursuits, these things are opening up something that we couldn't really have, we dreamed about. I was going to say we couldn't have dreamed about them, but I dreamed about this, 10 years ago and thought, wow, if only I could just have a flying camera, and now we have them.
Just one other thought on that. For all of human history, we've been basically stuck. Our perspective has been stuck at eye level. And now for the first time in history, we can see the world the way the birds do. And without the skills necessary, without having to be in the air, which is dangerous, without having the skills of flying something, cameras can now be positioned arbitrarily in space. And the question is, now that you have the boom of a Spielberg, the crane of a Spielberg for free, essentially. What are you going to do with it?
Right. Now, Jonathan, you're obviously attacking the space in a different way. As we look at that arc, why are you going after the space that you're going after specifically?
So photography is a really interesting application, and I'm equally excited about it. At Airware, we believe that drones are going to be used for such a wide variety of different applications, everything from agriculture to infrastructure inspections, inspecting power lines, pipelines, bridges, levees, oil derricks, oil and natural gas exploration, land management, anti-poaching operations, some of these of which we're involved in now. We really think that to address such a wide variety of applications, you need a platform so that companies who are developing a drone for a specific application aren't either leveraging a black box solution that they can't meaningfully extend in hardware and software, or they're not having to do it all from scratch and develop all of that themselves. They can focus on the pieces of hardware or software that are really meant to be differentiated for their application. So that's what we're building at Airware.
And Christian, you're addressing a number of challenges in the space, but specifically battery technology is one that you're doing some unique things around. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, I mean, our strategy or our vision is not as exciting as some of the stuff that these guys are doing in terms of filming kite surfers and all the cool stuff. We work with miners and construction people, and we try to, early days, try to figure out how to make their jobs more efficient and more productive. And so early days, I spent a lot of time just on the field trying to figure out if this is actually useful for them. And after a lot of weeks and months, I discovered that it was. Ran into a couple of people. One superintendent once said, he's like, at any given point at this construction site, there's at least 100 questions in people's head today that can be answered just by seeing something. And if they see that, they can answer that and move forward. Basically, what he was saying is that I can shave days off construction, and those are millions of dollars. So that was really what motivated me to start the company at Skycatch. And our biggest challenges today in technology that we're solving with, with these partners is basically completely automating the experience of the UAV, making it fully autonomous when it lands, making it fully autonomous when it swaps the battery, when it sends the data to the cloud, so that you're not involved in the process.
So battery technology, how long can a drone fly for on a battery? What's the latest?
We spent a lot of time optimizing how much electricity we send out to the motors. We've optimized our drones for the size, the props, the motors. So we get about 35 to 40 minutes with high wind time in the air. And our average missions are about 5 to 10 minutes and cover a really large amount of area. The idea behind doing is swapping the batteries, because the batteries haven't evolved in ages, and it's not going to evolve anytime soon. Some of the companies that are doing really interesting things with batteries haven't been really tested. There's some batteries that last a lot longer than 45 minutes, but they haven't really gone through the whole rigorous test of making sure that battery is safe. Right, so right now, today, most of us are buying batteries that have been thoroughly tested by great companies, and they've been mass-produced for hobbyists.
Right. So I mean, battery technology is one of the things that obviously is being addressed. As you kind of look out over the next few years, the pace of development in the drone space seems to be so rapid at the moment. I suppose I can't even get my mind around what it's going to be like 2 years from now. What are you guys looking at as kind of the next wave of developments that are going to enable sort of new use cases with drones, Chris?
Well, this weekend, 3 Follow Me projects launched, 2 of them on Kickstarter and 1 of them ours. So Follow Me is one of these things where the drone follows you. You're biking or skiing or running, whatever, and the drone just stays back 30 feet back and 30 feet up and keeps the camera, focused on you with the gimbal and gets that kind of perfect cinematic Hollywood view. That's, on one level, that is exactly what the YouTube generation wants. On the other level, it's incredibly complex artificial intelligence, autonomy function. It's using GPS and image, image recognition, spotting you, and then creatively trying to figure out what the right angle is, looking at the sun and the shadows and all this. This is the kind of stuff that was kind of science fiction a few years ago. This is the droid you were looking for, right? And this was just this weekend. There were 3 projects that launched, and one of them just raised $500,000 in a day. All based on our platform, I hasten to add. So that was just today. Tomorrow, this mapping function we're talking about. So what Christian's doing is this notion of construction. Construction is arguably the number 2 industry in the world. Agriculture is the number 1. Yeah. So what this copter, this $300 copter can do is a 1-button mapper. It just goes around, does circles around a construction site, takes pictures, gets sent to the cloud, in this case Autodesk, and creates this 3D model. That 3D model then gets snapped onto the CAD model that the engineering company was already doing, and then you get, and it's happening every day on an automated fashion thanks to the recharging stations, and now you get, you're the client, right? And you want to know what's going on in the construction site. Well, you can either drive to a construction site, or you can watch on the cloud, watch your building snapped onto the very CAD model that you approved, watch it building up, digitally, digitized, perfectly aligned. There's no BS. You've got ground truth or air truth, if you will. Yeah. And that's a $300 copter that's doing 1-button building mapping. Just imagine, what's going to happen in like another 5 years.
But it's interesting. You're talking about technology that is deployed actually underneath or on the drone. You're not talking about the drone itself. So in terms of the actual mechanics of a drone, are we going to see much development there, or have we kind of reached the point now where
so we talk. So the motto of the company is from the camera to the cloud. So right now we're using a GoPro. Eric's using a custom camera. It's even lighter and smaller and more highly controlled. And we're all moving towards bringing the sensors down to again the piece dividend of the smartphone wars is that the camera sensors are getting incredibly good. So we control the camera, we control the gimbal. Obviously the vehicle is controlled in space. Then you control the communications link. Then you control the ground stations. We use apps on phones. Then you control the cloud and the cloud services. Then you have big data and these huge render farms. And so, the point, the drone itself is just a vector to capture data and transmit it to the cloud where sense is made of it.
Right. And guys, what are you thinking about sort of where the world's heading?
Well, the internet kind of sort of enable a lot of the drone activity as well. I mean, if we didn't have internet, it wouldn't be as interesting because we're sharing all of this data through the internet. So everything basically just came to at the same time. And sort of going back to what Chris said, a lot of it came from the smartphones. All of that innovation allowed it for all of these pieces to be really affordable.
Right. And interesting, you mentioned about the internet. Eric's already posted the Downey, so it's already on Instagram. And if you find it under Eric, you can obviously retweet it. So one of the other areas that sort of the peace dividend from development that we're seeing online is extensive use of open source software, but also sort of open sourcing the hardware designs. And I know that in speaking to you all, although you're in separate companies, you seem to be collaborating around the common code, the common designs.
It's probably one area that I have a different perspective. The open source projects are really exciting. It's certainly what got myself into the space to some degree and a lot of the people on our team. I think as the number of applications broadens and as these drones are going to be deployed above people's homes and flying around people's heads, I think safety and reliability are going to become kind of more and more paramount in this industry. And I think that that's an area that open source is likely to struggle in, and that if we look at the model that most people use on their phones, most of the application-specific software, the features that all of these startup companies are building their business models around is developing the apps themselves, less around kind of getting into and modifying the Android kernel, if you will.
Right. And Christian, I know you've been using some of this open source code.
Yeah, I'm using 3 Robotics source, and we've forked it last year, working closely with them to make modifications to make it fully autonomous. To do all the landing technology, we had to make modifications, work with them on some of the, they have a vast community of people working on the software, so it's easy to get access to people working in different parts of the source code. But we basically, we couldn't afford to do our company and also work on an autopilot. So having that sort of available to us was extremely helpful.
And Chris, what was the thinking behind going that route with 3D robotics?
You know, I think the arc of history on this one's pretty clear. Open innovation's one. I mean, Linux is the most secure operating system. Not, you know, there's a reason why the internet runs on Linux and not Windows. I brought this up here for a reason. This is not actually our copter. This is not our drone. This is a Chinese drone made by a company connected to Hobby King and Walkera. They improved it. It's a derivative design, but that I don't mean to be pejorative. They improved upon it. You know, we've got 20 years of open source experience. You know, if you're using Android, if you're using Chrome, if you're using Firefox, if you're using WordPress, if you're using Linux, you get it. Open innovation. You know, with more than enough eyes, all bugs are shallow. And I think this is proven. This is the Silicon Valley way. And the fact that I brought this one up, we have our own drones out there, which we would like you to buy. But if you'd rather have something cheaper, if you'd rather have something white that looks like a Phantom, you know, here it is, and we did nothing. It works great, and we did nothing to make it happen. We just put the code out there, and the world used it.
Fantastic. Let's shift gears to another topic. I think all of us, when we were outside seeing the Downey being shot by Eric and watching Chris do his mapping exercise, were well, certainly I was slightly stunned by the skill it takes. So, you know, you guys are the professionals, and I know that there's some people from Accenture who are also, you know, in this space, and it takes quite a while to learn how to pilot these things. How difficult is it to learn to fly one of these things and to control them?
Do you know how to push a button?
I'm going to ask Eric, because I'll ask Eric first, and then you, Chris.
Well, let me first talk about how most people are using these today.
Yeah.
So they're still essentially manually piloted. I mean, they're autonomous in many ways because they do hover by themselves, which is non-trivial. And the directions that we're giving them with these sticks and these traditional controllers are not throttle up. It's really go up. You know, so they're high-level instructions. Go in this direction, and we're going to watch that command set kind of move up higher and higher as the technology improves. And so, you know, what most people are experiencing now is that it's very easy to put one of these things in the air and to do something simple. And the rest of it, unfortunately, right now is totally based on your personality. So, you know, if you are very careful, meticulous, and you have a goal and you know how to get there, you will probably be very successful immediately with these things. But if you, maybe you race motorcycles on the weekend, where you may end up crashing one of these things, because it does involve, if you're piloting it for creative purposes, you're essentially moving that camera around in space, and you need to have, right now, you need to have haptic feedback. You need the controls to respond in a way that lets you feel like you're connected to the device. So I have flown this Phantom without touching the radio, you know, using the apps. You know, you say, go here, 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 and come back. And that's fulfilling because it actually goes there and comes back. But while it's going there, I'm controlling the camera and trying to be creative in that way. And so I think there's always going to be that component of in the creative space of someone who's directing these sensors around in an interesting way. So I think the autonomy is always, in our space, in the consumer imaging space, is always going to be tied to some amount of manual interaction. And that could be perhaps programmed in for repeatability. I mean, I can imagine a director, you know, telling it where to go and then having someone else push the button, and, you know, you do it 20 times, it's the same every time. You know, so I think it's a complicated question. You know, they're very easy to use, but to do something at a very high level with them right now, it takes quite a bit of skill.
And Christian, you know, you're adopting a more sort of autonomous approach.
Right. So our focus has always been the data. So we're using these tools to get the data fast, retrieve it fast from different places, and be able to actually allocate these robots in places that, you know, conditions are very, you know, very bad, whether it's cold, really hot. And so, you know, most of our projects, if you go to some of our client sites, are not very interesting. You know, mines in the middle of the desert, but it's extremely valuable to them. Be able to have something that gives them visibility and keeps them safe, or creates volumetric measurements on a stockpile where they usually send people on top of them. So, you know, in terms of our technology, we sort of, you know, we used to tell investors is it's almost like, you know, in a world where you have no bikes, and we basically had photographers that needed to go around a construction site really fast. We created a bike for them to get on it and just go around. But our focus is not the bike. Our focus is the data that's coming back to us.
Right.
Right. So through creating the bike, we mixed, creating the wheels, and then we used some of his, Chris's products to create the handle so that it directed the right way. But our focus has always been the data.
And how is that sort of autonomous control evolving, Jonathan? I mean, in your platform, you're looking at supporting and controlling multiple drones. How is that playing out?
I think the level of autonomy is certainly going to end up being very related to how safe and reliable these systems are. If you look at people and companies who have operated these for thousands or hundreds of thousands of flight hours, of course, all of that is in the military. And a very significant portion of their losses are all related to pilot and operator error. And so as we develop the software to make the aircraft highly autonomous, and as you mentioned, put things like enforced workflows in place so that there's somebody who can create a mission, somebody who can check and make sure that's a safe mission, and maybe someone entirely different who's going to actually operate the vehicle by driving their van out there, hitting go, and flying the vehicle, where data processing and kind of generation of analytics and insights may happen completely differently and kind of as part of the cloud. I think a lot of that's going to be part of what makes these systems more safe and reliable to operate, as well as things like see and avoid, which is in development, and the development of algorithms that can take into account where the other vehicles are located, whether they're cooperative aircraft or non-cooperative manned aircraft who are part of the same airspace system, I think are all areas that we're working on development.
Yeah, sense and avoid is going to be really big. That's something that's in everybody's mind. How to solve that very efficiently without using a lot of power.
Your colleagues actually are doing something there. Are you going to introduce them?
I will. I'm not going to focus on pitching Accenture tonight.
Okay.
That's all right. I'll focus on, on you guys.
If you guys poke around the little copters there, I think you'll see cameras and interesting.
Yeah, there's some interesting demos and examples where we're working with a variety of different clients. Turning back to this topic, though, I look at a control like that, and I don't really know how it works. I suppose as you look at this evolving, are we going to have to get certified? Is it going to be like getting a license to drive a car?
Well, back in the days, you always had a certification to be a hobbyist, right? You needed to. I used to fly fixed wing, and I was certified, and you had to pay. And I think all of you probably certify hobbyists. But today, it's sort of kind of gone away. You can just fly them yourself. You don't have to have a certification. Before, you used to go to a certain spot to fly. Now you can just fly anywhere. So I think that we're gonna. I mean, Jonathan had a really great idea. In terms of the FAA, I think they should establish something where they force people to, set up some sort of certification where you say, in a year from now, we're going to require everybody to be certified if you want to run a business, if you want to fly drones. I think that's a phenomenal idea that will keep people away from doing crazy things.
I think we should expect that the FAA is going to be looking at certification in two ways, which are the same two ways that they looked at certification of manned aircraft and operations of manned aircraft, which is one, certification at the level of what is essentially a director of operations at a company who is operating drones. So this is the person who's responsible for everything that happens before the drone takes off. So training of pilots and operators, maintenance of the vehicles, putting the right processes in place to ensure that when that aircraft takes off, it's a safe and reliable aircraft, and the person who is responsible for operating it is going to operate it in a safe and reliable manner. And then the second piece of that is the actual operator of the vehicles themselves. They'll need to be trained, certified, licensed, likely in a way where that person knows the responsibility that is essentially in their hands, even if it's the case that the aircraft is fully autonomous and what is in their hands actually is nothing but air. Somebody inevitably will be the responsible party for operating aircraft in a certain area. And then I think the other very interested party that I think is going to be a critical piece of the puzzle is insurance companies themselves. Right now, about 1 in 50 to 1 in 100 companies that is seeking insurance to operate drone aircraft is actually able to get that insurance underwritten. And so the insurance providers and the underwriters of the insurance are going to play a very key role as well in establishing what some of the processes and procedures, how some of the aircraft are designed, what some of the software that's powering them is. It's really going to enable and determine how and where these aircraft can be used and for what purpose.
So Chris.
Yeah, I mean, at risk of being a little, introducing some drama, I mean, really? This costs $299. You can buy it on Amazon. You're going to need a certification to use this? It shows up under the Christmas tree. children use it. Do you really think the FAA is going to require this bit of plastic, which, by the way, is going to parrots is going to be coming out in November. It's going to weigh about a pound, maybe. It's all foam. It's going to be the hot toy. It's going to be the hot toy. It's going to be fully autonomous. Everything you described is going to be a toy under the Christmas tree. It's going to be the hot toy this Christmas. FAA certification?
So I know the panel is consumer drones, but somehow I got invited anyway. So certainly our focus is a little bit. And I'm happy to expand the focus. A lot of our focus really is different. It's on kind of enterprise-grade commercial applications, of which some can be addressed with kind of a very small camera from your cell phone. There's a lot of other applications that require carrying of larger equipment, larger camera systems, multispectral, hyperspectral cameras, carrying of systems for actually taking air into the aircraft itself, for doing analysis like air quality and looking for certain particulates in the air. There's applications where, so there's a wide variety of applications that many of our early customers are addressing, where the absolute minimum size of the aircraft is 2 pounds or more. They're definitely regulated. One of our early customers, Delta Drone, operates regularly in France, which I think at this point actually has the most mature regulations, as well as probably the most mature commercial drone industry in France right now. And all of it's regulated. And there's actually a very good process in place by which Delta Drone can essentially submit paperwork, have it faxed. I know it should be all online and be electronic, but they can do that within about 24 to 48 hours prior to flying the drone for a commercial application.
So let me ask, what's the status of regulation with drones in the States at the moment?
I think we're all on the same page that our number one priority is safety. I think Chris agrees on that. Everybody. I think that's the same thing that with the FAA, they're focused on safety as well. It's just that I believe, in my opinion, that they're not equipped today to deal with this sort of challenge. And obviously we have all sorts of different types of ideas, certification, get law enforcement involved, some sort of technology that detects these guys flying around to see how high they're flying. It's going to be a very challenging thing to tackle. And I think that the FAA is going to have to step back, collaborate with
We're here in Silicon Valley. We've seen this picture before. Right, so there was, telecoms, right, and the telephone companies were regulated, but the computers weren't, and then the computers were connected over LANs, and that's okay because they're just computers, and then the LANs were connected, and then that was the internet, and then it's like, oh wait, we actually don't know how to regulate this anymore, and same with personal computers, which kind of had this bottoms-up revolution. I think what we see is time and time again. You see white spaces. The world says, oh, well, it's 2.4 gigahertz, it's Wi-Fi, you can't possibly destroy the phone networks. And we do amazing things with Wi-Fi. I mean, Gary knows this better than anybody. Gary in the audience has invested in many of these. The Silicon Valley model is to sort of take the small, the sort of under the radar, the grassroots, the bottoms up, and add more functionality to it. So under 2 pounds, you can do amazing things under 2 pounds. These things, there's no reason why they can't have multispectral. They can have radar, sonar, LiDAR, all the atmospheric detection. If 2 pounds is the limit, fine. We'll do it under 2 pounds.
And it's totally arbitrary. I mean, 2 pounds, I was going to point out that, you see this product and this product, but on both sides of these products, you can pretty much run forever and see products on both sides. I mean, I kickstarted a project that lets me control a paper airplane with my phone. Right. And is that going to be regulated? It's possible, but probably not. And so wherever that line is drawn, you're going to see tons of products. I mean, you will see hundreds of products under that, whatever that arbitrary line is. And there's sort of 2 lines here. One is sort of the weight and the capabilities of the aircraft, and the other is commercial use versus hobby. And historically, hobby. I mean, I'm actually not certified because I came into the game much later.
I'm not certified.
And from what I understand, it's a voluntary guideline issued. Yep. It has nothing to do with what's legal. It has to do with what its users are willing to, the rules which the users are willing to adhere to. And so that's what we're really looking for, is a set of guidelines that are perhaps, voluntarily adhered to by this community. And then the rest of it is the message that these things are here and that they're not going to go away, and we need to be responsible about how we use them.
I think that the hobbyist world, when I remember I used to fly fixed wing back in 1994, and not 84, it's not that old. but it used to be engine. You used to put the gas on them, and it was a small community. You know, it wasn't like today, where everybody is a hobbyist, right? Everybody can buy a drone and be a hobbyist. So back in the days, it was a small community. Everyone knew each other, typically. You got the same news and the same updates. Things weren't shared on Facebook or Twitter, you know. It was just you looking at this thing, you know. So things have changed dramatically when it comes to the guidelines that they put together way back when, and it just doesn't fit the landscape today.
Right, it's interesting. I mean, I funded the Power Up paper airplane as well on Kickstarter, and you're right, I don't imagine that's going to be regulated. Can we turn to camera technology, Eric? Because obviously that's the world that you're focused on. You know, how is that evolving? I mean, you know, when are we going to see 4K sensors on these devices? And you know, what's going to be possible?
Well, a year ago, if you were to buy one of these with the goal of putting it in the air, you'd be buying something that would carry an existing camera. In many cases, the GoPro, because it's, you know, it was the smallest, highest quality payload that you could stick on these things. This product, this is the Phantom 2 Vision Plus, and this is what I shot that Downey with. You notice it has what looks like essentially a lens on a stabilizer, on a mechanical stabilizer. And this was the first product in this space that really just decided, you know, we decided to split the camera into stabilized and unstabilized portions, because there's no reason to stabilize a button that is used on land to start and stop the camera. You know, what you essentially want is a very, very robust, stable sensor and a lens. And so this is the direction. I mean, I've been flying these and other ones that carry bigger cameras for a while now, and you know, I much prefer the way these handle, and I feel like this is the way forward. So luckily, a camera is a camera, and they all have the same parts. And if you take away the parts that are required for use when you're holding it in your hands, it's still a camera with the same capabilities. You just kind of control it from another device. And so, you know, these cameras are going to hop on the same insane curve that normal cameras are on. And you know, we know that you know, GoPros are going to be proper 4K with a high frame rate very soon. And you can expect this to happen. I mean, it's going to happen this year. All of these will essentially be 4K flying cameras.
So will the cameras, I mean, two different paths, one with a separate camera, one with an integrated camera. I mean, how's that going to evolve?
Personally, I don't feel like the separate camera has real life in this game, because you can't do anything with it. I mean, yes, they're opening up APIs over Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and cables to let you control things, but ours is fundamentally designed to be controlled from the thing you're carrying in your hand or from another signal that's sent from wherever they're going to be sent from in the future.
And Chris, I think you mentioned Parrot. They're adopting a different approach on camera technology?
Yeah, so both of these are mechanically stabilized, which is to say that they've got these motors and these gimbals and these sensors, et cetera, and they kind of, you know, do this. Parrot, with their next generation copter, is digitally stabilized, which is to say that the sensors now have so many pixels that you can put a fisheye lens in front of it and then move the sort of rectangle of capture around the sensor so quickly that it achieves all the stabilization of mechanical without any of the weight or complexity. And so it basically is just a little, I mean, it looks like just a lens. And as a result, because you're reducing the complexity, the copter is smaller, it's cheaper, it's safer, and you know, it's probably not good enough for the kind of cinematography you do, but it might be good enough for most people.
But soon it will be.
Moore's law is a wonderful thing.
And weight's obviously absolutely critical. So
the fastest route to safety is lightness. If these things are dust, you know, if they're basically, you know, dragonfly size, shape, weight, et cetera, then no one, at that point, the whole regulatory question just goes away and it's ridiculous. They just can't possibly hurt anything.
So when will we, you know, on the ski slopes, we see people wearing the GoPros the whole time. When will we be seeing people with their own personal drone flying and following them down the slopes?
Next week.
Next week. I mean, we're seeing footage of it at the moment.
No, but what you'll see is you'll see one follow the skier into a tree. And that is what's going to happen, because none of these systems have any kind of proper sense and avoid technology. And so, you know, my response to seeing these Kickstarter projects go was actually not entirely positive. I mean, it was positive in that I love that they exist, but it's negative because I feel like the people who buy them and use them will be disappointed because they're expecting magic. None of the videos shot in any of those projects were actually shot with products that actually follow you and avoid objects. They're shot with piloted projects piloted, maybe yours. Okay, yours is,
Ours
yeah.
were fully
So okay,
autonomous.
if you're on the ocean and you're on a yacht, it's a perfectly great application. But in the real world on land, you have things that stick up, and it's unfortunate. But they'll have to either fly very far away from those, much higher, and then there's a question of how you retrieve them. You have to time your run pretty well so that when you're at the bottom, you still have battery life, so it can come back to you. Yeah. So I think that maybe these things will be like rocks in the future. You'll be skiing, it'll be like a slalom of drones.
Yeah, beautiful thing about it is that there's a lot more people thinking about it today. Smart people are trying to solve that than a year ago. And there's going to be a lot more people trying to solve this a year from now. So it will get to a point where it's extremely reliable. I've talked to huge companies trying to figure out how to collaborate and try to solve this.
It's great. So let's flip to sort of commercial use of drones. And Christian, question for you. Where are drones, you've given some examples of use cases, but where is the in for drone technology? What is it really good at doing, and where does it create value for commercial organizations?
This is my own opinion. I think this is something that Chris said as well. We're going through this phase where a lot of the focus is the drone itself. And just like the computer era, everyone was focused on the computer. Then everyone was focused on the operating system. Then they focused on what software applications you build on top of the computer. There's no news about new computers today. It just doesn't make sense, right? So that's going to go away. It's going to be more focused on the practical things of how people are extracting out of these drones, right? So that's going to, next year is going to be all about all this really cool stuff that people are doing with drones that are practical, that are adding value. And then eventually in the future, someone was talking, I read an article about how they're planning on using drones in Mars, or the moon to map Mars and figure out if they can put a jet engine on it and go around and just map it out. So there's, people are going to, you're going to see a lot of this application 5 years from now. There's going to be a lot of innovation. We've been able to get this far in just such a small amount of time. 5 years from now, all of this innovation is going to be a lot smaller, cheaper, far more reliable. His software is going to be all of the software is going to be far more reliable. Battery is going to be far more reliable. So the opportunities are incredible. We had someone asked us if we could build a drone for cleaning windows at high rises. So people are creative out there. So people who are building platforms like Chris and Jonathan are going to be able to provide for all these different rare use cases that people are coming up with.
But it's interesting. Some of the examples you give are aligned with improved safety, so you don't have to expose workers to risk, but also increasing productivity. So you're getting straight to what you need doing, and you're not having to worry about the safety and setup. Some of the use cases I know that your product's being used in.
For us we're using some tools that these guys are building to collect this data, and we're teaching all these industries how to use this data. So we spend some of the projects we're working are fascinating. I'd share some of them with you. We sit down with construction workers every day, and they superimpose these images on top of the screen, and they draw circles on top of it. They print them out. And we have 100 to 200 people using our images at these very incredible sites. They print them out. They take them out to the field. And the other day, someone lost something in the middle of the field, and we basically launched the drone and created a new map, and they were able to find this one item that they were looking for just by looking at our high-res images. So that's just collection of data and being able to see things right away. We want to go beyond that when it comes to data. We want to be able to detect things on the ground, alert people via SMS messages, the crane move, or the panel took 5 minutes, the construction site was 3 years. Let me analyze that data to tell you exactly what were the pain points, what were the areas that you could have improved on. The piles were depleted, not fast enough. All of those things are going to be tracked. Just 2 weeks ago, we had a construction site where they found a stockpile being gone, and then the contractor came back to recharge them for the stockpile, and they were able to use those images to say, you took this pile away, and then they brought it back, right? So they were able to catch those guys and recharge them. They fired them, but that sort of accountability didn't exist today.
Now you're also putting, the different sensors are being attached to these devices. What are some of the creative you were mapping. That clearly wasn't being done entirely with an image sensor.
Yeah, that was actually. That was
it?
just a GoPro. Software does amazing things. It takes these images and just does feature recognition and stitches it together. The big picture here is that, we, like many other industries, are digitizing the world. We have the ability now with this kind of, Moore's law of sensors, cameras, satellites, drones, camera phones. We have the ability to now measure the world around us, bring this into the internet, the cloud, the digital world we already have, and start to make sense of it. Agriculture is a great example. That's what's called an open loop system. You plant, you wait 6 months, and you hope for the best. Why don't we know what's going on? Because the farms are too big, because we can't walk the fields anymore, because we don't have enough labor, to do that. What if you could digitize farms? What if you could close the loop? What if you could, figure out that we don't have to spray pesticides today because we don't have a pest infection? We don't have a disease outbreak. How do we know that? Because we digitize the world. Let's not spray chemicals until we have to. That's just one example. It's essentially, these things look like toys. They could be green tech.
So let me ask a question. Jeff Bezos, when he was talking about the drone delivery with Amazon, and I want you to speculate, said that they were it was 4 to 5 years out from being a reality. Why is it 4 to 5 years out? What is going to happen and change?
We wrote a blog post about that. I mean, safety-wise, there's so many things that they haven't thought about. You can't have a prop, uncovered prop thing flying into your front yard with kids around it. There's things that, Chris and I talked about this. There's a lot of things these guys need to think about before you go into that world.
There's a lot of technical challenges that come into play between delivering something from a drone from point A to point B, and point A and point B are always the same, to delivering from point A to maybe thousands of Amazon lockers, to delivering from point A to everyone's household, including apartments and including homes and including anywhere else people may be asking for deliveries. So the broad scope of that picture, I would say, is likely much farther than 5 years out, and may, in some cases, in some areas, likely never be possible from a regulatory standpoint. But maybe applications where something's being delivered from a known area to a known area, I think, are some of the applications for delivery that we're going to see first. Some of our early beta customers are researchers at MIT who have a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation grant to demonstrate the delivery of vaccines and medicines in areas of Africa and Southeast Asia, where the place you're delivering to is kind of a known quantity and the place you're leaving is a known quantity, and the case is a life-saving scenario. And so there's a high motivation to make sure that this happens.
That's another thing that's really key, like working with autopilots, knowing your weight. You can't have that as a variable because it complicates the autopilot. So carrying things, it needs to be a fixed weight in order for it to be efficient.
Now, Jonathan, you mentioned sort of the social good aspect of drones. I'd be interested to hear more about those examples of where drones are actually, doing social good.
Well, given that we're building a platform, and so we're focused not on a single vertical or application, but kind of all at the same time broadly on a lot of the applications. One of the things we did early at Airware is we actually took a wall and we just started writing all of the different things on the wall that we thought drones were going to be used for. And we, of course, came up with a lot of the common commercial ones that we have talked about here. But then we also kind of had a section of the wall where we wanted to come up with some of the things that we hoped and we wanted to see drones really used for, and that's where we came up with things like anti-poaching operations and wildlife conservation and aerial delivery of vaccines and medicines, and those are two examples that we have been involved in since.
Any other?
One of the interesting requests we got early days, Walmart found us through AngelList of all places. And they asked us if, this is something they publicly talk about. They do. They use satellite imagery to figure out how many people go to the stores. But they wanted to take a step farther and find out how many people go to the stores based on their ad campaigns or their commercials on TV, right? So being able to map that and correlate that based on, so I did this ad campaign and 30 people showed up to the store globally and also regionally. Is huge. Another person was talking about a satellite company that's just sold to Google. how they're selling imagery around the all the manufacturing plants in China that are Apple manufacturing plants, where they can tell if they're manufacturing a new Apple phone, because they see the trucks going in and out, right? So they're selling this data to different people. And you can see how valuable that can be.
That's great. So we've got like 5 minutes before we'll go on to Q&A. But let's talk about like the business opportunity, where the money is. I've seen prediction by I think someone whose company is actually in the audience tonight around the drone market by 2025 driving almost $100 billion of economic value. The FAA saying in a couple of years there are going to be 10,000 drones. At the moment,
10,000.
We sell more than that in a month.
Right. So I was wondering why the FAA was coming up with a number quite so low. Yeah. Maybe they're talking about bigger ones. But so where is the value today? How is it going to evolve over time? I mean, clearly there's money in hardware today.
Yeah. So I mean, it starts with hardware, and then it very quickly becomes data. It becomes services. So right now these things are just basically a way to get sensors into the sky. What you do with them is the big opportunity. So we think that so we make our money from hardware today. We're essentially a software company. We're very happy to have other people make the hardware, and we at the end of the day nobody cares about the drone. They care about what it can do, and whether that's video or whether that's still or whether it's pure data. Like everything else in the valley, it ultimately turns to a cloud service.
Going back to what Chris said, fast forward, what these guys are doing is enabling the public to sort of like what Uber did for anybody to be a driver, right? They're doing the same thing. You can be a real estate agent and have a drone and fly it and provide sort of services to people that you couldn't do before. You can be a search and rescue person with a drone and you utilize these drones to find people, with the data and all of that. So the amount of things that are gonna show up in the next 3 to 5 years are just gonna be unimaginable today.
So the value will accrue to services, data. It won't accrue to the hardware space.
I think
satellites are a precedent for this. Climate Corporation is a great example. Climate Corporation said, "Hey, we'll take the satellite data and we'll sell it to farmers." And the farmers said, "I don't know what to do with the data." And so, to their credit, Climate Corp went back and asked the farmers, "What do they want?" And the answer was, "Well, we got this variability in our crops, and we'd like cheaper crop insurance." And so they took the data and turned it into sort of actuarial analysis that allowed them to generate cheap, better crop insurance, and became an insurance company and sold for $1 billion to Monsanto.
So I feel like I can't wait until the day when drones are boring.
Yeah.
Because I don't really, so I've been using these basically every day for some number of years, and I still get excited because they fly, but it's just a tool. And when I'm using these, I'm not thinking about the drone anymore. I'm thinking about what I'm doing with it, and I don't care about it. It's just a thing that can get a camera somewhere or a sensor somewhere. Yeah. You see that in most people who use these things a lot. And it changes a little bit if you're a sport flyer and you like to do flips and fly fast. The technology is changing fast enough so that you're always interested in what's coming out. But I'm interested in flying longer, flying more stably and safely, and getting better picture out of it. I don't think very much about the other features of the drone.
You're seeing that with journalists too. Journalists are getting bored of just reporting drones. Yeah.
I mean, this is about robotics in general. Robots are things that don't work. The moment it works, it's a dishwasher. And I can't wait for these things to turn into dishwashers. They do a job. Who cares? I'd love to take the word robotics out of our company name. 3dr.com, by the way, which we don't. And it's just like, who cares how it flies? It flies.
Yeah.
Discuss.
Our perspective, and I think Chris mentioned earlier, the cost of the hardware is just coming down every so many months. We have the viewpoint that, just consider the cost of the hardware free. Yeah. If all the hardware were free tomorrow, where is the value? The value is in the software, and software specifically that requires fewer people on the ground to operate the aircraft, that software that enables you to operate them in a fully autonomous way, software that allows you to decrease the risks associated with using the technology, software that helps you be compliant with whatever the regulations are as they're coming out and what the insurance requirements are. So really software, and then of course the purpose of all of this software, these big giant multinational companies who are all quote unquote interested in using drones As you said, they're not actually interested in using drones at all. They're interested in the data that they can collect by using drones. Drones is just one type of data collection mechanism. In many cases, these companies already have some way to get the data, but they're doing it from the ground where it's either personnel intensive, dangerous, overly costly, or very time intensive to do so, where any of those things can be decreased by doing it from the air.
Great. So let's have some Q&A. We've got microphones. Start over here.
Thanks. Two questions. First, is there any definitive website or publication or something where all drone people go periodically? So, for example, if somebody wanted to issue an RFP for a particular kind of drone, if they don't know who, there's a new drone company every week, so they wouldn't know who to send it to, so they could just post it there. That's the first question. And second is, how will the new FAA rules get made? Is there going to be a notice of proposed rulemaking? And what's going to prevent a kind of a bozo factor? I mean, because, for example, having a 2-pound limit on drones to me is kind of dumb because you could get killed by a 1-pound drone falling out of the sky. And so what would make sense to me is kind of a harm factor. You know, what is its terminal velocity divided by its hardness? You know, a 20-pound styrofoam drone would do less harm.
Interestingly, that's actually how France looked at the regulations. And so they actually have a number of total joules of energy that your aircraft can have at any one point in time, which is a function of airspeed as well as weight. I think one of the biggest problems in the United States actually is that Congress mandated that the FAA come out with regulations, and from the onset said that one of the dividing points is 55 pounds. That's actually really unfortunate. What they should have done is they should have said to the FAA, you come up with regulations that you think are appropriate, and the FAA would have likely looked at this problem and said, hey, 55 pounds does not make sense as a dividing line. What may make sense is 2 pounds or 5 pounds or a certain number of joules of kinetic energy. And it's certainly the case that in other countries like France, they have dividing lines at much lower weight classes than 55 pounds.
The way to think about it is really there's the sort of manned airspace territory, which is sort of like 1,000 feet and up, and there's the unmanned, the space where manned aircraft don't fly, which is below 1,000 feet. Above 1,000 feet, what you're really worried about is plane-to-plane collision. So what would take down a jetliner? You know, 55 pounds would definitely take down a jetliner. Would 2 pounds, that's sort of bird-sized. You know, it depends on friable versus non-friable materials, et cetera. But you kind of sort of say, if a jet engine ingested this, would that be a terrible thing? And that should be the limit. Then below 1,000 feet, now you're talking about running into trees and telephone lines and, you know, children and that kind of stuff. And there you have, you know, different, you know, there you're talking about personal safety. And I totally agree. I don't want 2 pounds landing on my head, which is why I'd like to have this down to about 6 ounces.
The other thing that really exists at lower altitudes and well below 1,000 feet is manned helicopter flights, including search and rescue, police, as well as life flight flights. They are almost always below 1,000 feet, actually. Helicopters are more efficient the closer to the ground that they fly. And as well, especially in agriculture, crop dusting, within the last 2 years, there's already been multiple incidents of small unmanned aircraft nearly colliding with crop duster aircraft. And a 2 to 4 pound aircraft is a large obstacle to hit at 70 miles an hour in a plane that only weighs 1,000 pounds.
There's, you know, the question is, what's the right sandbox? 83 feet happens to be a number arbitrarily in the law. 83 feet was, I don't know, some chicken farmer back in World War II decided that airplane flying below 83 feet were scaring his chickens. So there's actually, the number 83 feet is not regulated. Now, whether that's enforceable or not, but you just tell me what the number is. 6 ounces, 83 feet, you know, whatever. Well, you know, I think we can innovate around that.
And the question.
How are the rules going to get made? Is it an NPRM process?
There's a committee called RTCA.
So the question was, how are the rules going to get made?
Part of the process is there's a subcommittee, RTCA 228, in which there's both people from the FAA as well as several industry companies who are involved in coming up with part of the process and proposed rules. Later this year, the FAA is supposed to actually release what their proposal for the rules will be, which won't take effect until next year, and that's specifically for smaller unmanned aircraft.
So the other question that was asked was, how do you keep up to date in the space? Like, what's the forum that you're all that one should go to, or is that really yet to form?
So at Airware, we sit on RTCA 228. We also sit on the ASTM Standards Committee F38. Which is tasked with creating the act. So once rules are in place, what are the standards your aircraft, your hardware, and your software have to comply with in order to be used for commercial operations.
Should we on to the next question?
Also,
Sorry.
SUAS News, right? That's a site. Patrick is here somewhere. There he is in the back. That's where I go, SUAS News. He collects a lot of breaking news about this space. And then, unfortunately, in the consumer space, if you're interested in just hobby flying, you really have to go to the forums, and they're not very friendly. So just a little word of warning.
Yeah, there's a couple of C-SPANs where the head of the FAA talks about the challenges of setting up the laws. And one of the biggest challenges, and we have a lot of relationships with the FAA as well, is working with law enforcement, working with cities. How are they going to enforce these laws? And it just becomes extremely expensive if you start thinking about having these guys flying around and police having to be responsible for enforcing these things. You'll see courts and filled up with people claiming that they didn't break the laws and have no proof. So it's definitely a big challenge on that end. We are sort of tackling the private space area where a lot of these companies that we're working with have insurance for things falling off the sky. They have hard hats. So, and they're massive companies, Bechtel, for instance. They're sort of they're proactive at working with the FAA to figure out a plan of attack with them rather than trying to circumvent them.
Great. Next question, please.
Hi, I'm Eric Klein from Lemnos Labs. Chris, you made a great comment, which is that we're digitizing the world. Oh, hi, over here. We're digitizing the world. And my question to the panel is about privacy and ownership, which is what happens when I digitize my neighbor, or what happens when I digitize my competitors or valuable data. Well, how do you guys look at that going forward?
I get this question a lot. And the first thing is that a lot of people just are not aware of what the FAA regs already are. So flying over your neighbor's backyard is illegal. Well, I mean, it's banned by FAA regulation. Whether that's a law or not is a matter of debate. But you can't fly over populated areas. So anybody who's flying over your backyard is essentially an FAA violation, subject to a cease and desist and $10,000 fine. Privacy aside, and privacy, by the way, in the United States is incredibly fragmented because it's based on a community standard reasonable expectation of privacy, which varies from region to region. So we have something like, 80 city and town legislative processes right now to try to figure out. And privacy is also a moving target thanks to traffic cameras and Facebook and camera phones, et cetera. So I think that, at least in the United States, where we don't have a kind of monolithic privacy rule as they have in Europe, it's going to be solved more on safety purposes rather than privacy. Because the one thing we can agree on is we don't want that thing flying over our backyard, whether there's taking pictures or not.
Any other comments on that one?
I would just say that there's a lot of existing tort law in the space as well around privacy, and in many cases, flying over your neighbor's yard and taking pictures is actually more of a civil case than it's going to be a criminal case or a case where the FAA needs to be involved at all.
Also, a lot of people don't really know what these are yet, and they don't know what kind of cameras they carry. So they assume that if they can see one, it can see you. And that's really not the case. You might be 10 pixels in a resulting picture. And 2 weeks ago, a guy was attacked by a woman on a public beach because he was flying one. And he caught it, luckily, all on video. And Pablo's only complaint was that it was vertical video, which shouldn't be allowed. I know. And he was attacked because she said he was a pervert, and he was doing, and he posted the footage he got, which is very high level. It's like if you're looking at the Grand Canyon, that's the kind of shot you get. And she just didn't understand what the thing was and what he was doing with it, and chose to attack him for it instead. Also, one of the things people don't think about until they actually see them is that, so you can put your camera phone, you can just hold it over the fence, and you can take a picture of your neighbor, and they have no idea. You fly one of these buzzing things over their head, they totally know.
So next question.
Yes, so are you getting any pushback from industries you could potentially be disrupting? For example, if I made my business out of operating a crane camera or doing helicopter shots for movies, I'd be looking at this as rather threatening.
I think for many of the industries, they're looking at this technology as a tool and something very complementary to the existing way that they're doing it, and also as something that's going to increase the total market size. So companies who are doing existing power line inspections by manned helicopter, for example, are actually very excited about adopting this technology so that they can actually do some of the miles of inspection of power line that maybe are not economical to do today via manned helicopter with drones.
Eric, in terms of sort of cinematography, I mean,
Yeah, it's an increase in possibility. So the whole space gets a lot bigger, and you have these existing players who are doing perhaps something the old way, and there might very well be a good reason for putting a big helicopter in the air, and there are many good reasons. I mean, in the specific case of Hollywood, they've already been using these. I mean, when you see aerial shots in movies, chances are they were not taken by a helicopter. They're probably taken with a drone or an octocopter or something, and they've just been under the radar because it's not allowed. You know, you're not allowed to do this commercially by, you know, according to the FAA. But now that's starting to change. So we're seeing conversations between Hollywood and the FAA, and some exceptions perhaps to the rules.
Unlike most robotics, which we think of as replacing jobs, these actually create jobs, because right now it's hard to get cameras in the sky because it's dangerous and expensive, and you need trained pilots and certification, et cetera. So as a result, the skies are largely empty. So it's not like these things are replacing pilots that are there. These things are doing jobs that are not being done at all.
Yeah, another thing, my own experience, we were working with the University of UC Davis, and we went to one of their farms, and we were introduced to the farmer, and he did not like us at all. Like, he looked at us like, and the professor basically introduced us, and he's like, look, we want to try out this new technology. This is going to help us sort of automate the process of agriculture. And he was completely opposed to using this. He's like, I walk my farms. I don't use these tools. And the funny thing that we sort of just understood the whole process. And we went ahead and flew the drone around, got a lot of imagery, and we were using these like FPV so you can actually see what the drone is seeing. And we invited him to actually fly with us. And he refused to do it. We had one last battery. And we're like, we have one last battery, you wanna try them on? And the professor was just fascinated with these goggles. And he finally agreed, and he said, oh, all right, I'll put them on. And he put them on, and he's like, can you fly to the left a little bit? Can you fly to the right? Can you go forward a little bit? So that was beautiful. It's like you're never gonna you always need someone to analyze the data. And that's what he was doing. He no longer has to walk, but he can still analyze the data using these tools.
Okay, next question.
Hello here. I've heard about Facebook new NGO, Internet Org, something like that, and they want to provide internet signal to everywhere, right, to remote places. What's the big challenge you see here for Facebook to provide internet with drones, internet signal?
One of the big challenges is flying at such a high altitude. So the way they're proposing doing this is using solar-powered aircraft flying at about 70,000 feet. The benefit of flying at 70,000 feet is that controlled airspace actually ends at 60,000 feet, so that's helpful. The challenging part is to actually get up to 70,000 feet and operate there, where there's very little air, and where you need an incredibly light aircraft, which is, in most cases, not incredibly sturdy, but you have to fly through all the other layers of airspace to get up there. So that's a really difficult challenge. That's an altitude that's nearing space, and so you actually have to harden your electronics and your software to deal with things like radiation.
And Chris, it was interesting, over dinner you were talking about sort of the peace dividend extending, that the fundamental technology that goes into this is similar to the technology that's going into high altitude drones, satellites.
One of the things we think a lot about is, are we competing with satellites? The CubeSats and the microsats between, the Elon Musks and the Planet Labs and the Mapbox, et cetera, is just bought by Google. We saw this picture before. 15 years ago, it was satellite phones versus cell phones. The satellite phones, Iridium, Teledesic, it was like you put 64 satellites out there and you cover the world. Why would you put cell phone towers every 3 miles? That's crazy, it's so expensive. Well, we saw how that ended up. It turned out that the higher bandwidth, the resolution of the terrestrial network beat the reach of the satellite network. Right now, these things have 2 orders, 100 times better resolution than satellites, and they're under the clouds, and they're free. The data is free, and they're dispatchable. You can get anywhere, anytime access to the skies. But the satellites are getting better. The optics are getting better. They're getting cheaper. And so I think this is going to be one of those kind of epic battles, satellites versus drones.
But you can get persistent coverage with these now with technology like yours.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. And one thing I want to answer his question about Facebook. Getting social networks interested in flying things is phenomenal. It helps all of us. Just like 3 Robotics helped all of us with his innovations. It got everyone excited, helped me, helped everybody. I think that ambitious projects like that are fascinating. Challenging, absolutely. And I think that a lot of the stories out there, specifically on that technology, I don't think none of it has been tested thoroughly, but it's at least we're thinking big, and I think that's huge, being able to get there. And then going back to what Chris said, and these guys basically eating, satellite companies' lunch, I think that's going to happen. It's becoming easier and easier. Flying under the clouds is just going to happen.
Okay, next question, please.
So whether analyzing a field in agriculture or photography, what types of interactions do you guys see these drones with nature? For instance, a bird landing on the drone or maybe colliding with it. So tell us about your experiences with that are probably interesting.
I'm smiling because I actually wrote an article that talked about my 15 friends that lost phantoms the month after I flew over water and had this video go viral. So there are interactions with wildlife, certainly. And many of the protected areas have overflight restrictions, so you're not supposed to fly over them at low altitude anyway, mostly for nesting birds and other wildlife that might be influenced by these. I've flown over a lot of wildlife, and I find, for the most part, these things are completely ignored. They don't know what they are. If it's a big animal, they're small. These things are small, so if you're flying over something like a whale, which I have not done, I'll point out, because a lot of people will be listening to this. No, but there are a lot of rules against these things in areas. And so bird strikes are a factor, and this goes back to safety. I mean, I think if you can design these things so that they're resistant to being struck by something, the accidents can absolutely happen.
Regarding birds in particular, the copters are not a problem, but the fixed wing, the airplanes, are perceived as intrusions into a territorial space by the birds of prey. So hawks often attack planes, and I can tell you the hawks win.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I've had bees, dragonflies, sort of anything that flies will go investigate these things, and they usually just fly. Birds usually fly away from these things. I know some elephants have been known to be afraid of them because they sound like bees, and elephants don't like bees. So you have to sort of look at each animal and see how it might respond. But mostly it's looking at where you're flying to determine whether you should be flying there. That's the most important thing.
One interesting thing related to birds, we had a big company come to us asking, this is when we were basically saying we're about data, and multiple companies came to us asking for different use cases that are incredible, which makes me believe that this is going to be massive space. This company basically wanted to hire us to, dissuade birds away from these, what do you call it? These
turbines.
Turbines. And we were, the contract and the deal was attractive enough for us to say, let's try it out. And we did a test, and it's extremely challenging, right? So you're trying to keep birds away from these turbines. And, birds get used to you, and, they get scared first, but they get used to you. They go right past it. So it's sort of, as we put more of these things in the air, I think birds are just going to get used to these things flying around.
I'll give you one last story. The California condor is an endangered species, and they've been attracted north by ranches, by cows, and carcasses, et cetera. But their natural territory is down in Baja, and so the people who are in charge of the San Diego Zoo and others who are in charge of helping with condor conservation want to encourage the condors to move down south. So what they do is they they drop these cow carcasses on this sort of breadcrumb trail down south. But how do you tell a condor that there's a dead cow 10 miles away? And it turns out that these birds look for these circling columns of other birds. Well, how do you ensure, you don't have a lot of time. You drop a dead cow. You want to get a circle of birds going. How do you catalyze a circle of birds? And the answer is a drone. You get basically a drone to circle over a dead cow. From a distance, it looks like another bird of prey. The condors are like, whoa, food, boom. And you just keep doing it, every 10 miles all the way down to Baja.
Wow, that was a good question. Thank you. Next question, please.
Hi, over here. Way over here. We've been talking a lot about drones as flying objects in terms of pound, 2 pound, 20 pound. But as you said, Chris, they could become like dust. So I'm wondering about how you are interacting with your clients, with public like this, in thinking about perhaps a drone is in our centerpiece tonight, and able to view and listen to our conversation. And while privacy, you mentioned, was kind of an aside, I don't think in those contexts that's really the case. So how are you thinking about the evolution of drones in terms of embedded sensors into everyday experience? Because humans do not have the capacity, perhaps, to sense that there's a sensor.
Well, do you have a smartphone? Because I've been recording you this whole time. No, so these, the sensors are already here, and it may be more obvious right now because you have to take this thing out and do it. But we're going to have to catch up to this space will catch up to the phone at some point, maybe. But these are, of course, getting more and more interesting, more and more sensors being packed in and on all the time. So I think this is we've only gone in one direction historically. I don't know if that can sustain itself forever. I don't know if you have opinions on it.
I think, answering your question about drones everywhere, people are building drones for water monitoring. That actually, these boats that fly around, they actually navigate in the water, completely autonomous. So I think that you're going to see a lot of innovation beyond just flying things. It's just that the flying things just get center stage, get the most attention. But there's innovation in robotics everywhere. Mining, these big trucks are now completely fully autonomous in Australia. So, industries as a whole, they're looking for, automation. When it comes to safety, remove the human from very dangerous places and put robots instead. So that's going beyond just flying things.
It's got to be a privacy discussion, I think, fundamentally. If you're talking about miniaturizing things that can record, can move in space and record, we have to think about privacy as a fundamental issue, and no matter what tool you use to violate someone's privacy, you've still violated their privacy. And so, I would love to get the discussion away from drones and treat these things as just tools, sensors, moving sensors, and make policy around the entire class.
Great, next question.
This question is in response to Jonathan's statement about hardware becoming free. I think in the course of technology in the recent years has been that software has become free. And probably about every new service I enroll in today is with free software. So you seem maybe not so concerned about this trend, and I was curious how that mentality works and how maybe the business model works around that.
Certainly a lot of web-based software begins as free, and it's definitely the case that a lot of people, especially large enterprises, end up paying for a lot of that software. I know I personally pay for a lot of software, as well as our company pays for a lot of software.
Isn't it also that, this is just difficult. Some of the scenarios you're talking about, where you're using multiple drones, you're driving significant value, maybe not cleaning windows, but there's significant value at stake here.
I think of the drone industry in its state today as having a lot of corollaries to the early kind of computer industry. And it's certainly the case that people started by building a lot of hardware. They're building it in their garage. They're building things like the Altair 8080, where what you really bought was this big brick of hardware of which there was very little software available for it. Then there was the emergence of things like the personal computer, where a lot of the, initially you're buying hardware, then there's the emergence of things like operating systems, which I think we all saw both DOS and Windows become the platform of choice for a number of decades. And then, software moved into the web. And then I think we began to see eventually a model that was a lot more around maybe software that's free, but data that's paid for. And so I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see kind of a similar progression in where a lot of the value is in this space as well.
I agree. So our model is we give away the bits and we sell the atoms. We give away all of our software is free. It's all open source. We happen to make money by instantiating the software and hardware, and we sell some of that, and other people sell some of that as well, and we get our share. But I agree with Jonathan. I think ultimately the data is going to be where the value lies, and the services around that data.
And in fact, you mentioned that a lot of the services you signed up for are free. They're not free. The product is you, and you're paying in a different currency. So the data is what is important, and that's why it's free. The other thing about the hardware becoming free is that there are consumables in all of this stuff, and it's the battery. So I think all the other stuff may get free, but batteries you have to replace, and they're not going to be free.
Okay, next question.
Hi. So Eric, you mentioned a few times that the drone is just a tool. So we've heard how it's a tool to collect data and stuff, but I'm curious about specifically in the world of art and cinematography, like whether it be a Scorsese film, ESPN, The Next Blue Planet, what is it that the actual cinematographer will be able to do that they've never been able to do in the past, ignoring legality and privacy, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, there are, well, the great thing about creative arenas is that it's really up to the people who are out there with the tools doing these things, and it's whatever they can dream of, they can do. And so, I mean, we really think about these as cameras you can arbitrarily position. And so it's mostly the low altitude stuff. I mean, anything that's close to the ground, that's beyond reach, is new territory. And what we're seeing now is a mad rush for people to collect as much of that footage as possible because it's all new. I mean, the first video I had go viral was just a video of surfers. That was it. And I went out for a morning for fun and shot it, and no one had seen that. No one had filmed surfers from 15 feet up before and tracked them as they were going down waves. And it's not a particularly great video by today's standards because it was done a year ago, but it captured the imagination of a lot of these people. So it's really, cameras that can stay in one place, hover very precisely at low altitude, that create all these new opportunities. And there are some significant challenges. Like, these things make noise. They're big. They have the possibility of crashing, and you don't want to damage a fragile environment or people. And so there certainly are challenges. But if you go, I mean, if you just do a YouTube search on drone videos, you'll find virtually every kind of low altitude imagery imaginable. And some of it is incredibly creative. And a lot of it is just actually people having fun in their backyard. So it's, this the whole spectrum.
Yeah, it's interesting as you look at the rise of GoPro being used professionally with the deadliest catch, etc. One of the things that's amazing about GoPro is for camera people, it's kind of disposable. It can get damaged. When will drones be considered disposable in that kind of context?
I mean, I think we're sort of already there because they're similarly priced. I mean, this costs less than the high-end GoPro, and well, you have to add a GoPro to it. But they don't cost very much, and I think of them as being tools that are essentially disposable. If you're working, or if you're working in imagery, you've already spent a lot of your money and time on gear, on travel, all these things, and these are relatively inexpensive when compared to all those other costs. The thing that I'm worried about when you talk about them being disposable is littering. You don't want to really consider them to be disposable. I mean, if you go to some national parks now, like, to see a beautiful arch, you'll find phantom propeller parts all over it because everyone's tried to fly through it. So you really want to think about these things as being, and the batteries, can catch fire. There's potential for bad things to happen.
One of the things we're actually been working on with some of the scientific sensing is actual disposable drones, where the airplanes, where the foam was made out of biodegradable sort of corn-based foam, and you send 100 out and none come back, but the data comes back, and they this is things in the Arctic measuring, the temperature of pools. And what happens is when they don't have to come back, it doubles the range. And they land in the water, the foam melts. The very small number of metal bits, sink to the bottom. The batteries are a slight issue. We have to resolve that. But the foam, we've solved the foam. It's worth it. Just one last thought on the kind of the creative elements. We have set our this is the golden age of videography. We have in our pockets these most extraordinary cameras and software and a standard based on YouTube and GoPro that we now have the ability to tell our own stories, to record our own lives of cinematic quality. And this is just one more of those tools. If you watch ESPN or an NFL game, you get there's these cameras on wires, and you get these incredible aerial shots. Why shouldn't your kid's soccer game be recorded with the same fidelity? Now you can.
That's great. We've got time for one more question.
Here. Good evening, everybody. Regarding the application of drone for delivering goods in rural or urban area, and especially looking ahead when we're going to have like hundreds of drones flying, how do you consider the problem of the air traffic, also the air traffic control? Who's going to monitoring and manage? Is it going to be private or the public agency? So how can you see that?
We're working with NASA to explore some options of building out what is considered a low altitude air traffic management system, specifically for very small UAVs for this kind of futuristic application of something like aerial delivery. I think some of the key elements of that, of course, is like connectivity, internet connectivity with the drones themselves so that they can all be essentially relaying in real time where they're positioned and coordinate in a way like the robots in Kiva systems implementation are all communicating their locations with each other in real time so that what looks like a near miss between two robots is actually a well-orchestrated system by which the two robots could have never hit each other, even if one of them had lost communications. And I think we'll see something similar built out for small UAVs eventually.
We're doing the same thing. There's a standard called ADS-B, which is basically a transponder where aircraft carry this thing and it's sort of a peer-to-peer air traffic control for detection. But it doesn't have to be a physical device. It can actually, since we already have a telemetry link, it can be a virtual signal by which the aircraft knows its position, senses its position via telemetry, and then it's broadcast via a virtual ADS-B network that the FAA may run. So we are actually already implemented virtual ADS-B, and our vehicles can already report their position.
Just like we have cars that have registration and they're tracked by cameras in every corner and police and everything. I believe early days I was working on this thing called Air Highway, and we basically took the initiative to talk to the city first and figure out how they can benefit from these things flying around. So we basically created a structure. We focused on how the city benefits, and from registration, from toll payment. So basically tracking every single move so that the cities also benefit from these things flying around. And then we basically layer on top of that a sort of what the technology would be to lay out this sort of. It was a very ambitious project, sort of like 15 years from now. That's why I never did it.
That's great. Thanks. Back to Karen.
Just want to say thank you to our speakers so much for being so sharing with your perspectives. Really appreciate it. And also to Robin for your guidance pre and during program, guiding this conversation. You did a wonderful job. We have a small gift for you. It is the speaker t-shirt of the Churchill Club. Please wear that in good health. Video of this program should be available by tomorrow or the next day on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Churchill Club. And you've been a very wonderful audience as usual. Thank you so much, and hope to see you next week. Good night.